Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt on this July 9, 2025. Welcome. A lot going on in the world, but nothing more important than what has been going on at the White House for the last 48 hours, where President Trump has been meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu and all of the delegation from Israel, as well as his senior staff in the United States. Joining me to discuss the import of those meetings and what might follow from them, Amit Segal, who is one of the leading journalists in Israel and now a member of the ARC Media growing family of podcasters. I'm not quite sure what you've agreed to do with Dan Senor, Amit, but he sure does make people work hard, so I'm glad that you're involved with him.
Thank you so much.
What's the new gig at ARC Media? Are you going to be doing a regular sit-down with Nadav and Dan, or is it something you're going to do on your own?
Both. Actually, it's more involvement, both those monthly or bi-weekly episodes and something independent, because there's a huge desire for people to hear news about Israel in an unbiased way, and in a sense that doesn't make Israel I would say a criminal like in 99% of mainstream media.
You know, I am so glad to hear Dan is doing this and that you're part of it, because there just isn't much. There's you, there's Aviv, there's Nadal, Dr. Michael Orin is a regular guest, but there just aren't many people who are fluent in English who can explain things. So I would like you to begin by describing where you are on the Israeli spectrum. As an example, I've been doing radio for 35 years and television for 33 years. People know I am a center-right conservative. I'm not as hardcore as some. I'm definitely more conservative than most, but my friend Mark Levin calls me a rhino. I guess I would be in Likud, but I would be kind of a liberal Likud member. Where are you, Amit?
I think we could run on a ticket together, according to your description. I'm center right, like 70% of the country, give or take, more from the ideological perspective of the staunch anti-withdrawal approach. I grew up in a settlement in Judea and Samaria, but both in terms of economy and it puts me, give or take, where you are.
Very good. That gives everyone a GPS on which to work. My first major question about the here and the now is, in your opinion, Israel coming to the end of a 2-year war or a series of discrete wars, or is the 12-day war something separate and apart with Iran that will forever be understood as separate and apart, or is it all one war?
So history would remember this war as one that began on October 7th with the massacre and went on till the dramatic moment of attacking the Iranian nuclear facilities. However, we still have to deal with the remains of the Iranian proxy ring around Israel. Hamas is the most stubborn one, and it's very, very difficult because of all the tunnels and, of course, the humanitarian situation. I would say that if there hadn't been Israeli hostages in Gaza, the war would have ended a year ago. But the situation is more complicated because for Hamas, the hostages are like the get out of jail for free card. Every time they're in a severe situation, they release more hostages, thus getting 2 months of ceasefire and humanitarian supply, which actually gives them a lot of money to the pockets of Hamas. Nonetheless, since after the what seems to be as a hostage deal, there would be only 10 live hostages in Gaza, I think we can see the end of the Gaza war at sight. And I think if Israel is stubborn enough, it would defeat Hamas.
No, I agree with that. That's how I assess it from very far away without any personal stake in it, without ever having been in the fire range of a rocket or had to worry about a brother or a child or a nephew or a niece or a grandson in the IDF on active duty. But it looks to an American who follows Israel not as a Jew, but as a Zionist, someone who supports the state of Israel as the equal of any of allies of America has in the world. I think it's going to be over soon. When it's over, and you step back from it, let me begin by asking Amit Segal, how will it have changed you personally, if at all?
I think the war made me think that they mean what they say. I live in Jerusalem, which is only 55 minutes from Gaza, and yet, before the war, I felt closer to New York City or London or Berlin than to Gaza, because we were under the impression that we live in the West. The territory doesn't matter. And what we saw is that when there is a will, there is a way. And this monstrous will of eliminating the Jewish state and killing as many Jews as possible led Hamas to this horrific October 7th massacre. But make no mistake, that's exactly what Hezbollah wanted to do. That's exactly what Iran tried to do while targeting civilians, hospitals, schools, kindergartens in their ballistic missile attack on a daily basis in this short-term blitz in the skies of Israel. So I think my lesson is that we should never, ever, whatsoever allow again a commando division to be on our borders. And that's exactly what Hamas was. It wasn't a terrorist organization. It was a commando army, an Iranian commando army. And we must eliminate it before we can have as if we want a better future for all children.
Now, meet an American of my age is always going to look at 9/11 as a ghastly surprise that we probably overcorrected for, but which we were awfully lucky it wasn't much worse. Tactical surprise, strategic idiocy. They killed 3,000 people, but they hit the wrong four targets. You give me four airplanes and four targets, I can cripple America much more than it was crippled. Do you have a sense that Israel narrowly avoided catastrophe, even many exponentially times greater than occurred on 10/7?
History would doubt for dozens of years, maybe for a century, about the 6 hours and 1 minute, the historic moment in which there was an opportunity to destroy the state of Israel. And it's between 6:29 a.m. on October 7th and 12:30 p.m. Why is it so important this hour? Because this was the time in which two Israeli divisions came to the north to protect the border from a Hezbollah invasion. In those 6 hours and 1 minute, there was an opportunity for Hezbollah to invade the north exactly the same way Hamas did in the south. And Hezbollah was 10 times stronger, 10 times more equipped, 10 times with more equipment. And that would actually lead to a dramatic moment that I'm not sure Israel would have survived. Add to this a surprise ballistic missile attack from Iran, and you would see not 1,200 casualties, but in my opinion, 20,000. I'm not sure Israel would be able to overcome it. There is an horrific sentence that I heard from a very senior commander in the Israeli army saying that had Hezbollah joined this attack in this morning, Hezbollah and Hamas would give each other high fives in Tel Aviv.
Well, it is pretty stunning. Let me ask you about that and follow up on that. Um, what is the long-term impact on the Israeli psyche? I think America has been having a PTS collectively since 9/11 that's caused us to make our politics to fray, our communities to fracture, and for our strategic clarity to get completely clouded by the fact that we were traumatized at having thought ourselves invincible and invulnerable. Do you see a similar long-term effect on Israel?
Yes, but for good and for bad. For good because Israel is quite experienced in this, and for the wrong for the bad part because 9/11 was a one-time event in one part of the country, and Israel is a much smaller country. October 7th was 50 times bigger
Yeah.
in a relative terms than the 9/11. Everyone knows someone who died. In my street in Jerusalem, there are three soldiers that died following October 7th. I'll give you an example from my children. My children heard maybe 8 sirens in the entire war. Jerusalem is one of the calmest places in Israel. yet they are a bit traumatized. My daughter, my 2.5-year-old daughter, asked me now, she heard an ambulance. So she asked me, is there a siren? Do we have to go to the shelter again? I told her, no, it's okay. It's only an ambulance. So we as a country, it reminds us the very nature of the Jewish people that every once in a while someone tries to eliminate us.
I'll be right back with Amit Segal. He works for, I believe, Channel 12 in Israel, and with Dan Senor at Arc Media. He is a regular commentator there, and I hope a frequent visitor to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Don't go anywhere. Amit's coming back on the other side. We'll talk about Trump and Netanyahu next. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Amit Segal is my guest as we begin this program. President Trump has finished meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. They've had 2 full days of meetings behind them. We really don't know what was discussed. We haven't had any leaks. It's a very tight ship that way. Amit, what do you think? What have you heard they discussed, agreed upon, or came close to agreeing upon?
In the tactical level, they wanted to actually set the terms for the ceasefire, in which half of the live hostages would be returned to Israel in exchange for 60 days of ceasefire. In the most strategic level, I think what they discuss is Iran and normalization. A war with Iran, what comes next if Iran tries to actually resetting its nuclear facilities, and on the other hand, how to reach normalization with as many Arab countries as possible, especially Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, and Indonesia. Those are the 4 countries, the 4 Muslim countries that are considered to have the highest chances of joining the normalization with Israel.
Well, I hope that comes to pass. Now, I want to know if there's a political impact of Netanyahu being the only person who's been here 3 times in 6 months, and one of a very small group of people that includes Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher, who had absolutely ironclad relationships with an American president who was not American. Does this impact Netanyahu's political future in Israel?
It actually helps him. And Netanyahu used to have 2 dramatic assets in the eyes of the Israeli voters. One is being Mr. Security, and the other one is being Mr. Diplomacy, Mr. United States. He's fluent English, which is a bit better than President Trump, in my opinion, and he's full control of the U.S. political arena. Now, as for security, he suffered a huge damage following the failure of October 7th, but he slightly recovered, or not that slightly, following the successful war against Iran. So there is a challenge for him in terms of security. In terms of diplomacy, especially with President Trump, Netanyahu enjoys a dramatic gap, a qualitative edge over his opponents, and maybe it would pay. It would we can probably see it in the polls to come.
So the big question for me is, does Israel address, in the aftermath of the conclusion of the war in Gaza, does it address its fundamental domestic problems, which I understand? I don't get involved in other countries' domestic politics, but your Supreme Court is completely unchecked and is one of a kind in the world of rule of law systems. And your Attorney General is a position without parallel anywhere in the world, given the power that she purports to assert. Do those 2 issues get resolved in the near term, because they are outliers in the community of civilized countries?
I do hope. By the way, in Bangladesh, they have something similar, but not something. I mean, it's not a club you want to join. It's utterly crazy, in my opinion. Yet, I think for the center left in Israel, it's not about the Attorney General or about a law. Or it's about their feeling that the Supreme Court and the Attorney General function as the U.S. Senate. It's the second chamber of the parliament. It's like the House of Lords that keep their democratic values, because there is a tension in Israel between being Jewish and being democratic. Now, the center left believes that if the Supreme Court is weakened, so Israel would cease to be a democracy. In my opinion, it's ridiculous, but I don't underestimate the feeling of being traumatized and worried. So I think there should be a consensus on the way of changing things. For instance, having it incremental, relatively slow, with a wide consensus. I think it's possible following the next election, and I think it's going to happen.
All right, my last question, Amit. I'm an old guy, and so I look at that generation rising comparing to the generation that I went through. I worked for Reagan in the White House back in the old days. I'm very optimistic about American politics on the center right. We've got not just J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth and Tom Cotton, but there are a lot, there are a lot of people who've got a lot of talent. Do you feel that way about Israeli politics, or are you going to have to wait for the generation of warriors who are now in the field to mature before you feel that way?
Absolutely yes. And more than this, whereas in the US, there was a belief for many, many years that the Democratic Party is demographically expanding while the Republican Party is shrinking. In Israel, it's exactly the other way around. Demographically speaking, you have the right wing grows way faster than the center left. So you see a process in which the right wing gets bigger and bigger, which would make it very, very convenient for the next leaders of the right wing to form a coalition. And, uh, leadership would emerge, especially from the battlefields. You have many, many great commanders that have such an experience that Israeli commanders didn't have for the last 80 years because they have been fighting for the last 21 months. So I think yes, there are people to look up to, and we'll hear about them soon.
Okay, very last question. In terms of the Haredim, the last mass casualty event in Gaza was, I believe, ultra Orthodox troops. I didn't even know that they were operating in Gaza, but a number of them were killed. Does that debate settle down in the aftermath of that with respect towards the ultra Orthodox, or does it accelerate given that it's 7 versus 450 soldiers killed in Gaza since 10/8?
That's the weakest point of the right wing, because a big part of the right wing is the ultra-Orthodox party, the Haredim, and 90% of them do not serve in the Israeli army, and 50% of them do not take part in the economy, in the workforce, and this problem must be solved as soon as possible. And this is something that can be changed following the next election. I do not believe in only sticks or only carrots. I believe in a combination. And I think it must happen if Israel wants to survive, because we need a bigger army and a bigger economy in order to fund this very unique situation in which 8% of the GDP go to fund actually the anti-missile system, the most sophisticated weapons on earth, etc. So I believe it must be solved, and the sooner the better.
Okay, an appendix of the last question. Is there a form, is there a form in which this is being discussed in a non-political setting, or is it always party politics?
It's always party politics, unfortunately. And I think that one of the reasons why the ultra-Orthodox parties became so strong is because of the moratorium against Bibi, which you are quite familiar as Americans, because the anti-Bibi and the anti-Trump sentiments are quite the same. So
Very.
the best idea for Israel is, in order to solve this problem and the Supreme Court debate, is to have a wide Zionist center-right coalition that would not need the ultra-Orthodox so desperately, so they will get whatever they want. I think this is the best solution for Israel, both domestically and internationally. And I think the public wants it desperately, and it's actually going to happen following the next election, which are scheduled.
I hope you get it, Amit. And in the meantime, I hope everyone subscribes to your newsletter. It's Noon in Israel, which I read every morning. Amit Segal, thank you for joining me. Keep coming back. Congratulations on joining Dan Senor at Art Media. Stay tuned, America.